do we have the makings of something with Charlotte?
I think for the first time in a while, there's more optimism because of the young talent, right? LaMelo, as long as he's been in the league or as long as he's been in the national, he's not that old guy. He's just now kind of entering his prime. Right. You mentioned Mark Williams. Brandon Miller, that injury just sucks. I mean, like, because they haven't had the consistent health over the past few years, in all honesty, right. Whether it's LaMelo, whether it's Mark. And keep this in mind too, they were already dead last in field goal percentage, right? Like, so losing your second leading scorer it's just rough. And this team can just never seem to get on the right foot, whether it's LaMelo, whether it's Grant Williams. I mean, like, he's done for the year, and he's a big part of that defensive resurgence that they've had. It just seems like bad luck. You know what I mean? We've been saying the same thing about this Hornets franchise. If they can just get healthy, right? Before it was Gordon Hayward or like just somebody was Terry Rozier. It was always somebody that was just out when somebody else is coming back. This team already isn't super talented. You start picking off the few pieces that they have, and it's not going to take long for another. I mean, you mentioned the 10-game losing streak. They had an 8-game losing streak even earlier in the season. Right. So, like,
they only have 11 wins.
Yeah.
We're halfway through the season. They've only got 11 wins.
It's not great, right? But if you're looking for, hey, again, with a huge caveat, if they can get healthy, then yes, I think that there are young pieces that can move forward and really grow. And if they can keep them in the building, which is not something this franchise has always been able to do, then I think that you can look up next year and with another high draft pick and have real confidence about this team moving forward.
All right, before we continue, I don't know why I did this, but I confused Miles Bridges and Brandon Miller. Somebody else who's had his own issues, but we all know what he could be, right? If you go back, 3-4 years, and you saw an emerging. Potentially an emerging star until all the off the court stuff. I would have been fine if the organization simply moved away from him and got nothing for him. But that's not the way professional sports works, unfortunately. Miller's got injury issues. Mark Williams put up 38 points the other night. Yeah, and I do wonder if he is sort of the linchpin in all of these things coming together. They have been searching for an impactful big man for, forever, right? So is he it? Can he be it?
I definitely think so. You've seen him make leaps offensively. You mentioned the 38 points. He's developed a nice little elbow jumper. The pick and roll game with LaMelo works really well. They can do either pick and roll or pick and pop with those guys. Yeah. If they could surround them with more shooters, I think that they'll be in a better position. Again, you're missing Miller with the wrist injury, and Grant Williams not known for a scoring threat, but can knock down those spot up threes that you get when you're on the weak side and someone's so concerned about LaMelo. Some of those rotational sort of 3-pointers, those are the things you need in order to unpack the lane for a guy like Mark Williams.
So, you're right about Grant Williams not necessarily known for his offense, but what he is known for is he can have some of those nights. Yeah. And you get him off the bench and just get hot in the second quarter or, late third quarter, all of a sudden it's 4 threes in a row. We saw that happen in Boston a few times with him, but it's also the leadership and the defense and all the other stuff that he provides. Because obviously their winning percentage is .275. They're not making the playoffs. Right. So what assets can they afford to ship out? They already traded Richards, the other center. And for what it's worth, I don't know what kind of pro Josh Okogie is, but I remember him at Georgia Tech thinking, this guy might be a pro because he's got decent size and he's super athletic, and I loved him as a player. But what assets can they move out that might bring them something interesting going forward?
I thought the Nick Richards decision was interesting, considering Mark Williams has his own injury history,
right?
And Richards was on a really, really team friendly deal. I was just surprised. There was a larger market for him, and so they wanted to move on. I guess again, if you're not staying healthy, it's not really going to matter. The biggest thing is I want them to stand pat with the young core that they have.
Okay.
Right. Like I like, you and I have gone around the bend with the LaMelo thing. I want to ask you. So how do you feel about LaMelo? You've seen him.
I feel the same about him. He's an incredibly talented player that I'm not sure you can win with, but he is a super talented guy. I wish he was a better shooter. I wish they had better shooters. There's still nobody. There's still a poor three-point shooting team, and that's the NBA game now. It's hard to have nobody really on your team who can even shoot, upper 30s to into the 40s. You got to have one guy who can light it up. But if LaMelo can be that guy, then great. But I'm not a huge fan of him as a winning player.
He's shown flashes of, shooting at a high clip and making a good percentage. I think some people maybe don't love the amount of threes that he shoots, or maybe some of those threes are things that you're a little early in the shot clock. But like you said, like just the game has changed, and you have to have somebody that's putting it up. I would prefer if, as good of a shooter as he is or can be, I would prefer him not to have to carry the load, both scoring and assists, because his assists setting up guys. He's still one of the best setup guys in the league. But if you don't have the talent around him, some of those would be assists just turn into defensive rebounds.
Yeah, and honestly, maybe as Mark Williams, if he can stay healthy, as he establishes himself, maybe he relies less on that. And look, part of my, I don't know, whatever my opinion is of LaMelo Ball, part of that could be because he really hasn't had a good cast around him to feel like I got to do it on my own. I mean, in many ways, I feel the same way about him as I have about Trae Young, who incredibly talented player, and other than games at Madison Square Garden, I ain't sure Trae Young's a winner.
I mean, he did go to the Eastern Conference Finals, right? And on a team, I don't know if anybody really expected that Hawks team to
no,
do
but that was sort of
did.
weird because Philadelphia fell apart in that series.
True,
I think Philadelphia threw the series. No, not really, but
but no, I mean, it was a surprise, right? Like that experiment in Philly just.
Ben Simmons didn't want to make a layup. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, you got a 6'11" guy with the ball under the basket and no defender, and he decided he didn't want to shoot it, and they needed a bucket. Let me ask you about a couple of other things. But first of all, is Seth Curry tradable?
I don't know what value he.
I like to keep him. I think Seth Curry. I love Seth.
I'm kind of, I don't love smallish guards who can get hurt defensively. Like that's my own personal thing, but
he can shoot.
But he can absolutely shoot, and that's something that they don't. Yeah, they don't have a lot of that. So like you need something like that, and because that skill is so valuable
for them too, they need that.
Yeah,
he could be Steve Kerr. All right, let me ask you about. I mean, could be. And speaking of Steve Kerr, his Warriors are 11th in the West.
Yeah.
This is a weird conference. Minnesota, Dallas, and Phoenix are 8th through 10th in the West. Golden State is 11th. Should Steph leave?
I think you hear a lot from the fan base that he shouldn't leave, but he should put more pressure publicly on the team, right? Like they and I think Draymond said this, and I think Kerr has as well, or at least intimated that they don't want to give away the shop, give away the future for getting better now. But the problem is Steph is your future. Like this is all about Steph. You're never going to have a player as good as Steph Curry on your team again. So you have to maximize that right now.
It's a top 10 player in the history of the league. Yeah, it's hard to project that you'll have anybody even
so
close
I don't know what they're
good.
waiting for. I don't know what, like, I understand that they wanted to bring the younger players on like pods and have them play a larger role. But at some point you need just a bet, like just somebody who's there now. I'm not saying those guys aren't good and they can't help you win a game, but in terms of championships, which is what you're talking about, anytime you have a great player on your team, you're talking about championships. Are they going to make the playoffs? Yes, I think that they will eventually get back into it and make the playoffs. They start off like gangbusters, where they like 15-5, and then they have just, I mean, it's submarine pretty quickly, and it's because they were asking. I think they were asking too much of players that just you can't count on a regular basis like that.
I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs, though, man. Minnesota, Dallas, and Phoenix should get better, too.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. I guess I still believe overall in the system, and I also believe that the rumblings are getting louder and that they're going to make a play for somebody. I don't know who it is. I haven't really read any specific players that they have targeted or rumored to target, but I just have a hard time believing that you're willing to give up a year of Steph Curry so that 5 years from now you have the draft picks or you have the cap space or whatever it is. Like that just doesn't – it just seems like you're hustling backwards. And for an organization that described itself as light years ahead of everyone else, that everybody else is caught up and they've regressed.
Final thing, and we have to go here in a second, Brenden Whitted, at HU Cosell, Bison Express, Howard University, joining us here in the Adam Gold Show. Jimmy Butler. I don't know if he'd be a fit in Golden State. I really don't. Probably not. But he wants out. He's getting himself suspended. He missed the flight. I don't know how it could go so badly for somebody who was so good for that franchise, and that franchise hasn't changed other than maybe they're tired of putting up with your BS, or maybe they think your coffee's too expensive. I don't know. But Miami is closer to 4th place in the East than they are to 11th. They're right now, I think they're the 10th seed. They're closer to 4th than they are to missing the playoffs. What gives, and what are they? I mean, where's Jimmy going to end up? And frankly, based on this behavior, who wants him?
It was always going to end like this with Jimmy, though, right? Like it ended like this in Philly, and ended like this in Chicago, and it's the same thing every single time. Money, right? Like, hey, give me my money. As soon as he didn't get that extension last year, the writing was on the wall for this sort of messy, ugly breakup. And of all the franchises to do this with, the Heat are maybe the worst, because they at no point are they going to capitulate to him acting like this, because that's known as one of the toughest franchises in the league in terms of, hey, this is how you do stuff. You come into camp in shape. We're very serious about this, and that's how they've had such sustained success, even without great players. Like I think Jimmy's a great player, but I don't think he's one of the top elite guys, especially anymore, because I agree. Remember he was missing a lot of time with injuries, and there was some off-court stuff. But the thing is, and you brought it up, I'm not going to trade for that problem, right? Like I'm not going to give you value for it. Right. Like if I'm another team, it's like, okay, I'll make a trade for him, but understand I'm walking in knowing that he's going to want a new contract, and if he doesn't get all the things that he wants, this is how he acts. And that's just unprofessional, right? Like we've never seen the extent to which a player has been kind of this unprofessional. Like you had problems with a locker room. I mean, Draymond did punch that guy, but like, you know what I mean? Like, so,
yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Right.
So like, but Jimmy just not showing up for games. You're hurting yourself and your teammates a ton, and your trade value.
Brenden Whitted, my man. Appreciate your time at HU Cosell on Twitter. We'll do it again soon. Happy New Year again.
Absolutely, man.
Peace.
Happy New Year, man.